Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Mozilla Curriculum Workshop. On this episode, we'll be talking about physical computing, and if that phrase is new to you, then you are in the right place. I can't wait to learn us alongside with you as we talk and work with our stellar invited guests tonight. Before we start, I want to share a few details, logistics that should help the workshop go smoothly for everyone out there in audience land. First, if there are people in your social media feeds wondering why the show has not started yet, please kindly ask them to refresh the landing page. This should start the live stream for them. Second, this is a participatory webcast, and you, the audience, are a huge part of our energy and success. So please ask questions and suggest ideas in the etherpad, the large editable document in the second half of the page. You can also participate in side conversations on the chat there, and we will do our best to address the questions that you bring up, as well as your ideas. About halfway through the show, we are going to shift from talking to prototyping and trying to come up with some teaching and learning materials about physical computing that we can deliver through the web, and we totally encourage you to stay with us and to join in that prototyping on the etherpad and any documents that link from it. One of our invited guests, Jeremy Boggs, a design architect at the Scholars Lab at the University of Virginia, regrettably could not join us at the last minute tonight, but we will plan to have him back on a follow-up episode about the Internet of Things later this summer. If you like what you learned about physical computing tonight, you're going to love that episode as well. Conversation will continue, and speaking of continuing the conversation, I'm going to hand things off to my co-host, Amir Adala, for introductions.
Thanks, Chad. As Chad mentioned, I'm Amira, and I am from Mozilla as well. And I'm really excited to be here tonight to discuss the Internet of Things. If some of you are joining and are novices like me, who are very new to the Internet of Things world and are just eager to jump in and learn more and see how it can apply to us, you're in the right spot. And we are collected a group of very exciting professionals from various aspects of Internet of Things world who are going to share with us their perspective on Internet of Things and how it relates to their work and what we might be able to build together. So like Chad mentioned, this is a very collaborative approach to creating curriculum and talking through Internet of Things. So please jump in and share with us, ask questions for our speakers and us in the document, in the etherpad, on social. We'll try to be where you are and to curate answers with you throughout the next hour. So without any further ado, I want to start by introducing our speakers. So I'm actually going to start first with Natalie. Natalie, can you give me an introduction? Tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do? And for the people like me, what is physical computing to you?
Sure. So hi, I'm Natalie Freed. Right now, I teach high school. I teach physical computing and programming and electronics to 9th through 12th graders. And that's, I guess, my journey there started with doing educational technology research. In general, I'm really interested in the intersection of code and technology with physical, tangible, beautiful things. And I think those aren't incompatible at all. And they're just interesting materials to work with. So then ended up wanting to share that more. And so now I'm teaching. And I guess physical computing to me is a little bit like that description of digital and physical together. It's often projects that involve some tangible component, often have electronics so that you can get something in the digital world into the physical. So maybe it's something that someone can interact with and it actually senses that person. And sometimes it's for art and sometimes it's for hobby projects, and there's just a whole bunch of things you can do with that, and then I guess we're not getting into Internet of Things yet versus physical computing. I'll wait on that.
So that is a great description for us to start with. So thank you and welcome, Natalie. Andre, I would love to intro you next and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what is physical computing to you.
Hey there, folks. Good evening or afternoon or morning, depending on you are. I'm André. I'm located in the beautiful state of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, where I have the pleasure to work with Mozilla Clubs as a regional coordinator and jack of all trades, doing stuff related to web literacy, physical computing, and all sorts of creativity, experimentation with technology. For me, physical computing is when you finally have software that you can kick. Things that you can basically, it's like Lego blocks with logic. So I can't really define it quickly, but for me, it's the most amazing fun thing I had with technology in a very long time. I'm having extreme fun playing with physical computing. And if I had to try on a definition, I would say that physical computing is about making dumb physical everyday objects smart. And I will leave this definition of smart to someone else.
I think that's a cute introduce Jie and have her explain the next part of physical computing. Jie, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what do you do, and what physical computing is to you. Welcome to create your own or elaborate more on what you think is smart into, or dumber objects into smart.
Hi, thanks so much for having me here. I'm really excited to participate. My name is Jie, and I'm a grad student at the MIT Media Lab in the Responsive Environments group. I'm also the creative director of Chibitronics, which produces these circuit stickers. And the goal of my research and Chibi is to create tools that enable people to create technologies and learn technologies using arts and crafts, a little bit like what Natalie was describing earlier. And I guess the thing I'm really excited about is not only how do we learn about technologies, but how do we use them to express ourselves and turn what's in our imaginations into real things. And so building upon the current definitions of physical computing, for me, I guess one way to look at smart is maybe things that seem to come to life or have a mind of their own. So one thing that's been very exciting to me when I add computation or electronics or code to the physical things around me is that I can make them sense my presence. It can make them tell when I'm touching or blowing or shouting at them, or even just looking at them, and then they can respond automatically in a way that non-computational objects often do not. And I think that's really magical. It really allows us to create things that do seem really smart, but in the sense that maybe there's a life in those materials that wasn't there before. Yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much, Jie. Those were actually 3 really great explanations to start us off, and I really appreciate all of that insight because I think you just boiled it down to somewhere like a novice like me that I mentioned actually, really can explain that maybe to someone else. So thank you. And now that we've got you rolling into questions, I'm going to toss it over to Chad, who's going to continue the questionnaire of this part of the call.
Yeah, absolutely. I will also say that my name is Chad Sansing, and I work as a curriculum developer with the Mozilla Foundation. Forgot that in my introduction, I apologize. I'll also remind people now is a great time. If you haven't named yourself yet on the etherpad, in the upper right-hand corner of that pad, there's a little spot with a color swatch, and either probably your name, which you typed after it, or the word unnamed. And if you would just go ahead and identify yourself there, that'll help us know who's saying what in tonight's chat, and it'll help us kind of address your specific concerns and questions. One question that I would love to ask our guests tonight and to hear what they have to say is this. What do you think educators should know about physical computing? What might be on the way? Why does it matter? Like, why should we bring this into our learning spaces? And how might it fit with some of the formal and informal teaching and learning that you see going on now inside and outside of schools? I'm going to practice my teacherly wait time, but anybody can jump in.
I can jump in and give a partial answer. I think one thing that's super important right now is that we've got these devices that we're using. They're getting more and more portable. You kind of have this, even young kids have cell phones and have access to screens all the time. And for me, physical computing is this opportunity to have ways of interacting with the logic and the intelligence and the connectivity of technology, without necessarily being always glued to a screen that's sort of a single person, brightly lit, distracting thing. If the technology could be in other things, you could have more natural interactions with them, and ones that you have more control of than versus these sort of screens that a lot of us are struggling to figure out how to balance using screens all the time, and really kind of seeing the world around us. And then I also think that a lot of the technology we use every day are things that we can't actually modify ourselves. And so physical computing is this opportunity to empower anyone to understand how your technology works, to make it for yourself, to not need a company to decide exactly how it's going to work. And I think that's really big. Yeah. If anyone wants to add to that.
That was a great answer. That's difficult to follow, but Jie or Andre, what do you think?
So maybe building on that, what's been really exciting for me about physical computing as opposed to computing in general is exactly that off-screen component where, you know, you look around at the objects around you and you're used to them being kind of static, and there's a really magical moment when you see something light up that you don't expect to, or you see a sound coming from a place or a material that you don't expect, and that magical interaction is what's so powerful about technology to begin with, right? There's that famous quote where any technology that's sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. I think that still holds true because there are many places that don't have these technologies. And then it's up to us to like decide where to put these, and it's up to us to create these new technologies, not just the companies, not just the engineers. And the other thing is, I've been doing a lot of research on this sense of wonder. Wonder is when surprise causes curiosity. And I think putting these technologies in new places is more opportunities for wonder, and that leads to perhaps more curiosity, which will get more people like myself, one of these people, to suddenly become interested in computation when I wasn't before. So, yeah.
I think wonder is a fantastic motivator in this space. Andre, what would you add or bring to the conversation?
First, I'd like to say that I'm printing both definitions and framing them behind me. And I love this idea about the magic and wonder about it, because I remember reading a programming book that basically changed my life. And they said in the book, on the very first, the preface of the book, where computer programs were like spells that caused behavior and change to the world. And the thing is that physical computing is like spells that you can actually share with your friends on a living room. So it's the motion forward with this idea of like being a wizard and creating things and animating things. If you basically check like Disney Fantasia, it was all about animating stuff. And this idea that we can have this whole sense of wonder and giving life to dumb objects, this is very powerful. And I think that brings engagement to teaching scenarios and educational scenarios, so that you can actually teach basically any subject through the lens of physical computation and experiments. And that's something that really, I think they can really empower non-traditional teaching methods. And that's basically what I want to use that stuff for everything, because I just want to be immersed into that stuff. That's basically it. So I'm basically stealing the previous answers.
I love the idea of kind of but the wonder and the tangible magic. Again, these are great motivators, I think, in the space. Amira, what do you think? What's a good follow-up question?
I just feel like I've been taken back to that, little kid inside of me that's watching Disney and Fantasia, because everything about that seems so young and spirited and magical. Like that was the repeated word, I think, like a few times, and so it's really nice to see those overlapping themes, but really it kind of feels like we're bringing out that youth and kid and inner self amongst us. Nice. So the next question that I really want to follow up with that is, what needs, opportunities, and challenges do you see right now in providing learning space resources about physical computing, essentially, especially as a gateway to Internet of Things? So I know that that's a little bit of a wordy question, but I really want to see how we can address those. What are we seeing as the opportunities, the needs, and what are the challenges that we're really seeing around this field as it's slowly evolving and it's going to only continue to evolve? I'm going to ride the silence.
I, I can't stand the awkward silence, so I need to say something. I'm on a different context here because we are an emerging or submerging country, depending on who you ask, which means that access to the devices used in this kind of scenarios is hard. The devices are extremely expensive here, so our largest challenge to physical computation is that we cannot leverage all the amount of amazing little boards available everywhere. Also, most of the teaching resources are not available in our languages, which prevents many people from accessing them. Those are the challenges. But the opportunities is that Brazil is basically the fourth smartphone ecosystem in the world, like in sheer number. Like Brazil is kind of big, everyone has like 3 phones. It's horrible. And if we could find a way to like repurpose old devices and experiment with stuff that's already in the country, then it might be more feasible. So what I see here in terms of challenge is that it's tricky to get devices and it's tricky to get localized resources. But what I see in opportunities and gateways is that if you check our corruption schemes in Brazil, you will see that there is no people in the whole world that's more creative than us. We are very creative, and if we put all that creativity into repurposing old hardware and creating our own boards and creating our own resources, we can have teaching resources for physical computation that can be replicated in other emerging countries, and that's where I'd like to go.
Yeah, so writing on that answer, I do agree, even coming from the perspective of someone who creates tools, it can be very challenging to get them to certain parts of the world, even if the tools exist. And so one thing I'm really interested in is, I mean, actually taking a step back, I think it's magical that we can have this conversation right now in all these different places, all these different time zones, and share this information very freely, and that somehow use that to leverage, but rather leverage the fact that we can exchange information so freely, and to somehow maybe use that to inform how we can use local physical resources. Maybe that's what you're saying. So share the idea, the spirit, and the philosophy, and then trust in people's creativity and with their local resources to create tools that are relevant for them, rather than trying to create the same resources that are going to be used everywhere, which is perhaps hard to do, but maybe that's why we're here. Or actually, another thought. And I don't know how this would work, but maybe if we can't make the specific tools, if we can make the tools to make the tools, right? Like if we can't have the exact same boards, can we at least all have milling machines to mill boards, and then go from there? Is the one level up slightly easier to share, as a question?
Yeah, I think tooling is like especially important in physical computing, and understanding the variety of materials you can use to create armatures and scaffolding and circuitry. It's really wild. I just wanted to, again, just really encourage the audience to jump in. Physical computing can be like a really a big topic, and if there's an example we can share or something we can illustrate for you, just let us know. Or if you'd be willing to share at line 32 on the etherpad an aha moment when something you made just kind of clicked or worked and you had that sense of wonder or magic we've been talking about, or agency, we'd love to hear from you, like, what were those moments for you? And again, you can just type those in at line 33 of the etherpad. And as those kind of pop in, maybe now is a good time to start transitioning and shifting to prototyping. So during this part of the show, we're going to join our guests in trying to prototype or quickly create a resource for teaching and learning on the web about physical computing. And it might be a tool, it might be a design document, it might be a tool that makes the tool, right? We're going to try to think through a few ideas, maybe pick one, reach some consensus on something we could all kind of hack on together at different pieces. And we're going to try to do our think alouds to keep up the conversation as we work. And you can find that work right on the pad. We'll be prototyping around line 49 or so after we do some thinking together at line 43. We'll also link out to any other tools or sites or resources that we're using that are online. And you can just join in the thinking, you can join in the questioning, you can be active in the pad, in the chat, or in any of these documents as well as audience members. All right? So we looked at some ideas that interested our guests ahead of time with a pre-show survey. And I thought I might just invite each guest to give like a brief pitch or description of what they had in mind. We have the resources that are online. We're not all in that same workshop working together. So we'll try to figure out something we can make some forward progress on together over the web tonight throughout the webcast. So I thought maybe I'd start with Jie. Would you tell us a little bit about your asynchronous video platform for sharing projects?
Hi, yeah. So I guess one thing that I found in my own research is that you get so much more when you have an actual person in front of you talking. And I've used this when I create video tutorials. I use this when I learn from other people's video tutorials and things like that. And I found that so much happens when you can all get together and have a conversation, like what's happening right now, in fact. But it's really hard to get everyone to sit down at the same time. And as you, I'm sure, know, trying to herd us cats. So I wonder if there's some way to have a little bit of both, where you have the richness of a conversation, but you don't have to coordinate having everyone present at the same time. I don't know if the video is what if that is the most important part of this conversation, or if there's something else. But I wonder if even just having video as medium for conversation would be interesting. I don't know, just that. And you can, but the other cool thing about video is you have audio, you have image, you have all these other mediums at your disposal when you use this form of communication. That's the other thing.
It reminded me of kind of like Instructables meets Stack Overflow with like a super friendly community kind of feel. It's a very, very interesting idea. Natalie, do you want to talk a little bit about the Internet of Hugs, which is a fantastic title?
Sure. I first wanted to say that I love Jie's idea. I think the asynchronous part of that is so interesting because, yeah, coordinating people is hard, but if it could just be like, here's a snippet of my progress, and then people are coming back to it and maybe leaving videos, I think it's just very interesting. So I like that one. So the Internet of Hugs is something I've been interested in for a long time. It's basically this idea of using physical computing and the internet to be able to interact with someone or communicate with somebody at a distance. Some kind of physical object, like it's a little flag, and you can lift up the little flag, and then on the other end of the world, your friend who has a little flag will see their little flag lift up. And so anything that's a connection that can keep people connected at a distance, that's customized to their particular interest. And so Jie and I have done some work from like specific objects like this. But what I'm fascinated by is the idea of a toolkit to make that kind of remote connection really, really easy. Because I think you could invent all kinds of things around that if you just had one little bit of communication that could go activate a physical object somewhere else.
The toolkit idea, I think, is very important and a good like scale spread opportunity for the Internet of Hugs, right? Because then it gets into the hands of people who might need support in identifying the resources they would need, the steps they would need to follow. And that would be kind of an interesting thing in a classroom, like replace that old postcard paradigm. Like, we're not going to send postcards to another school. We're actually going to have this IoT connection, this physical computing connection. Very interesting. Andre, you were thinking about hacking on mobile devices, is that correct?
Yeah, basically it's the whole idea of we do have lots of devices, and many of the toolkits that we have, that we are currently using for Internet of Things, such as all the little boards, we are playing with like Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, Tassels, phones, and board of the week. But we do have lots of smartphones that are pretty capable, and I would like to see if I could maybe like create a little experiment that would go like from the phone into the device and maybe the other way around, something that we could start inserting more of our current devices into these experiments. That's basically it. What I was envisioning. I do have a really nice IoT teaching kit here that has like a bridge into my computer, and I can do things like when you receive a tweet, do this and that physically. And that would allow me to basically connect the phone into other devices over Wi-Fi or network connection or some service integration. That I think brings, because the thing I'm trying to build here is that if you deliver like a kit, like a box to a person, and they have these amazing pieces that they can connect and play together, it's like, oh, the amazing stuff is in the box. The stuff I have at my home is not amazing. So if we can start making that little box interface with the amazing stuff that we all have around, then people might be more encouraged to try things out. When I was a kid, I would basically disassemble every electrical device at my home to see how it worked. I never figured out how it worked, and I always broke everything. But it was a powerful notion that I could actually disassemble and mix things. And I would like to see that kind of stuff happening more. So phones are pretty disposable these days and powerful, and I would like to play with them along with our other kits.
That's really interesting, especially about kind of providing access to physical computing and IoT experiences, Internet of Things experiences, in places where other kinds of mobile devices or computers, laptops, desktops aren't prevalent or widespread, or you might not come into contact with them on a daily basis, weekly, or even monthly basis. So that's really interesting. And thinking about areas of overlap, would it be interesting to think about how we could make kind of a kit and a support mechanism for an Internet of Hugs kind of connection that maybe adapts or recycles or reuses, if not phones or technical devices, things we might find around homes, classrooms, things like that? What are people thinking? What's a good direction to go from here?
I think one thing I'm really curious about, Andre, you mentioned having a particular toolkit and all this interesting stuff on your desk, and I think it might be kind of cool to pool our knowledge of, well, what boards are out there now, what tech would you need to make that possible, and more plug and play and so on. And if we started like a collaborative document, we just started putting like, oh, because you talking about phones, and it reminds me of that little Bluetooth light blue bean thing. There's also this new, I forget what the company is called now because they changed it to Particle, I think, and they've made this device that connects directly to cellular networks, so you can reuse that network that's just kind of always on, always connected. But then your phone's already connected to the internet, as you said, so maybe having things talking to your phone, maybe there's a cheap way to do this. And I'm sure like all of us know little bits and pieces, but maybe we could put that together to start with. That's not a specific idea, but that's just like a starting point. What would make any of these ideas possible?
Like a design document for a possible kit that maybe listed a couple different options of boards, but also materials you could use to make the physical pieces. There is a document made, and it's at line 59 of the etherpad, where we could kind of sprint on this idea, share resources, and then as we're kind of assembling that list of materials, but also maybe practices or resources people could look at, audience members, it would be great to have you on that document kind of asking questions or adding comments to the side, like, I've never heard of this board, but maybe I've heard of Arduino. Like, what makes one better than the other? Or where can I find these things? Where do you get them? Like really practical questions about how you might source and begin to play with some of these things. Those would be fantastic clarifying questions for us to have in that document, and really helpful as designers of teaching and learning materials that we want to share and have be used and remain useful to people. So I think that would be the ask. If we jump into that GDoc and can do our best to think aloud about what we put in as required materials and why, if our audience members can keep pushing us with, why that one? What does that do? That might make for a really interesting interaction tonight around physical computing. Sound good? Sound good? All right. So let's dive into that doc at line 59. And audience, please come with us. And then as we start, Mira and I will try to continue to ask a few questions from the chat and Pat as well that haven't been addressed yet. All right.
Pat, I think that that document might be view only. So while you open it up, maybe in the Hangout here, we can actually start chatting about what tech would we need to make this possible, what materials, and even further thinking like how could we make it economical in the sense of what Andre was bringing to the table as well. I don't know if anyone wants to start jumping in before we start jumping into the document.
I love this idea of listing resources, mostly because I treat mobile devices and IoT boards like Pokemon. I need to catch them all, and I'm eager to discover new stuff. As you said, the doc appeared to be view only for me, so if we are going to start chatting, I can start doing my infomercial of the devices I have here, which there are lots of devices that, because see, we face here in Rio a difficult situation where basically to teach some aspects of like physical computing when you're dealing with development, there are lots of barriers here. So first barrier, people have no idea how to program. Second barrier, they don't know English, which is the language that most programming language take some cue from. Second, some people are actually illiterate and can't read and write even in Portuguese, which makes it for a kind of difficult situation. So how can we ease them into physical computing? So is there like any kit where people can just assemble stuff without a computer, without programming? And one kit like that I really enjoy is the ones from Little Bits. They allow me to just plug stuff with magnets, and I can have some quick working toys that people can be amazed with, like, hey, I can actually build this thing, and then we can start moving them slowly into more complex situations. So basically here I have the one Little Bits kit. It comes like with 18 bits, and I love them all. And this is the one kit that we can do like workshops and explorations without any programming. That's like my recommendation for if you have no idea what physical computing is all about. This first kit will get you hooked. And I'm sure that there are other kits that allow you to just assemble things without programming or coding. And I would love to learn more from you that have more experience in that kind of things. And I want to learn more about circuit stickers.
On that invitation, let me explain what are circuit stickers. I wish I had a sample, but I could write a link here. If you go to chibitronics.com, that's where you can find circuit stickers. And the idea is that these are little stickers that are actually circuit boards. So they're flexible circuit boards with electronics on them, like LED lights or sensors, or there's a programmable microcontroller. And on the back of the boards is conductive adhesive. So when you stick it down to something like conductive ink or conductive tape or foil or whatever, you actually create a connection. So you're building circuits but you're using stickers and tape and kind of craft techniques and craft materials. And the idea is that you would do it on, for example, paper. So it feels like you're doing arts and crafts, because you are, but you're also building electronic, functional electronic pieces. So that's the idea there. And one thing that I really I think is important is that once you create the circuit, you can draw and personalize it. And I think no matter what kind of technology you're creating, it's important that you can make it your own, because that's when you start to care about it and you care about learning and making it work. So that's one idea there. Yeah, so that's what circuit stickers are. I hope you can check them out.
Yeah, they're fantastic. We've used them. I remember National Writing Project workshops.
Oh, yeah, great for notebooks.
Absolutely. I think the document is ready to go, so I'll gently nudge us over there. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I'm going to screen share that document and make a big window so people can kind of follow the action. And then I'm going to pose a question or two from the chat. So even though it's very difficult, as you are working as a guest or audience member on the document itself or adding comments, if you have an idea, if you have a response to one of these questions, please kind of jump back out, share it with us, and then dive back into the doc. All right, I'm going to go on screen share, and I'll pose a question in just a second after people get a chance to get started.
So now on line 30 of the GDoc, can we list the known kits that would support the Internet of Hugs spec? Is that what? Oh, sorry, there was another page. See, Google Docs is slow here. Sorry.
How do you get line numbers on your Google Doc?
There is an add-on for Firefox that gives you line numbers.
Nice. Okay.
Most amazing thing ever.
That's so useful.
And also, I have an add-on that allows me to split the window so that I can have two pages on the same screen. So I have the Hangouts on one side and the Google Docs on another side on the same view,
nice.
Which is awesome and also slow. Has anyone here used a kit from Sam's Lab yet?
I don't think so. What is Sam's Lab?
Sam's Lab, these guys here, they create this amazing kit. It's like little wireless little bits. You can have these little modules. Each module has a battery and a wireless connection. I think it's Bluetooth. So this is like this is proximity sensor, and then you have like motors, tilt sensors, actuators, servos, whatever. And what you do is that you have like an app on your computer that allows you to connect those things on a canvas on the app, and then they connect them wirelessly. So you can have like a tilt sensor on one corner of the room, a motor on the other, and tilting one will activate the other. It's amazing.
I'm going to jump in since we're talking about those kits and the Little Bit kits as well, because I've seen them used kind of to great effect for prototyping, even with novice coders and circuit designers. And so there are a couple of questions in the pad. I'm going to try to combine them and see what you think. The first question is really about what might be a good place. It's kind of like what we're creating. Right now, where's a good place for someone to start bringing physical computing projects into the classroom? Like, what are some best practices or best projects to begin with at any grade level? And then moving out of that, could you describe maybe some pathways people take from beginner to intermediate to advanced in working with physical computing. So where can people start in a classroom? How can they bring it into their teaching and learning and their day-to-day work with youth and learners? And then from there, whether in that classroom or as individuals go out into the world, how do you move from beginner to intermediate to advanced?
I have an answer that skips over the first question, which hopefully someone can answer well. But I have some thoughts based on my last couple of years teaching, based around how do you go from beginner to intermediate to advanced. Because I was surprised when I first started teaching that the types of resources I saw out there didn't work for all of my students. And a lot of them were, here's an example, build this example, and then tinker with it and see what happens when you change something. And there were so many resources for how to program Arduino and for how to do other things that were based on that model. And it worked super well for some kids. And for others, they were just lost because they felt like they didn't understand the concepts they were working with. And they were really frustrated because they weren't getting structure or scaffolding or any sort of conceptual grounding in what they were doing. And so I found that if I could build things up in logical steps, it kind of helped everyone. And then there came a place where the kids who liked just starting in a really messy way learned the advantages of being more structured sometimes when they wanted to. And then the kids who did not feel comfortable with this messy, just jump in and change anything and see what happens, eventually got more confidence and more of a grounding, and so they were more willing to experiment. But I think you do want, at some point, some kind of conceptual understanding of what you're doing, because sort of messing around in the dark will get you so far. But eventually, to be able to predict what you could do in the future, it's a big help to do that.
That's a good point, and I'm also still trying to learn how to introduce more complex thoughts. But for the beginning portion of the question, I found that even just showing how to connect one LED to one battery and getting it to light up that first time and getting it to work is very exciting for a lot of people, and especially if you can put that first light moment in the context of then a project that they create for themselves, or for their friend, like turn this light into something, a flower, a card, whatever. Just that initial very quick success gets a lot of people excited and even surprised by, like, oh my gosh, they got it to work. And so I found that to be a really good way to get started. Just even simple single light and just very simple materials like wire or copper tape and battery. And then maybe, and I don't know, maybe you guys have more thoughts on this, where if you limit the number of materials very early on, it actually encourages more exploration without being overwhelming and confusing. So that's one thought.
As Jie was saying that, I actually, what flashed to mind was, does anyone here remember Kane's Arcade? It was like this very popular video about, Andre, I see you shaking your head, so I'll explain it for you and then for others as well here. But Kane's Arcade was this revolutionary story of this young boy who built his entire arcade out of, I think it was like cardboard and paper, and he had people in the community come and visit and play with it. And it was such a, that was maybe an aha moment for myself, and I think millions of other people who watched the video, but it was like such limited resources that he was actually able to create this experience for himself and for others. So I'm kind of thinking about that, as how can we actually limit the amount of resources and create that sort of experience in this toolkit. And I'll share that video in the etherpad if anyone wants to watch it.
I'll say that I found starting small and discrete with clearly defined kind of outcomes and steps helped build confidence. but that even in doing so, creating some space for the risk takers and explorers in a group or a class helps too, because they might jump 1 or 2 steps ahead, but with something kind of as new as wiring and coding at the same time, at least at the middle school level, people don't get too far ahead. Maybe they got far enough ahead to come back and help classmates kind of catch up to where they were, or to finish the day's lesson before moving on to the next one. And that was a pretty neat kind of tempo and cadence that led to really interesting individually developed projects with multiple components later on. It was also fun. We did one project that really stood out as something that was engaging for many students, in which some used an Arduino, and others who maybe didn't feel as confident in coding used little bits, was to create little cardboard armatures for, we call them protest bots, and so they were small little bots with messages they wanted school administration to hear, and we kind of set them up in a parade on a table and made a little slideshow of them. We probably could have and should have grown it out into a video production to share with the administration of the school. It was kind of hyper-local and very middle school specific. But things like that kind of creative expression, I think is a fantastic outlet you can pursue with physical computing.
Yeah, I clicked the mute button like twice, trying to unmute myself. So complementing on that, I don't know if that's my particular experience, but I've noticed that if the devices or the things you have at the disposal of the learners are like, they look too complex or they look too expensive or too new, people tend to be afraid. So I do like working from scrap materials, so people feel encouraged to destroy everything. When I was in university, we had like today it's probably called IoT lab, but that time was robotics with scrap material. So basically, all the computers and all the devices that the university was throwing away ended up on our lab, and we were encouraged to build stuff out of them. And that felt very powerful because we knew that those devices were destined to the dustbin. So if we broke them on the workflow, that was not bad at all. We were working with like 10 years old, 20 years old computers. And I think that may allow for some destructive creativity on the learner side, where they are not afraid to experiment. I think that if they see this crispy kit, they might be afraid. But if we just have lots and lots of scrap material for them to assemble their creation, they might be more encouraged to try out. That's like a thought.
I really like your point about being not afraid and maybe even intentionally breaking things, because, and this is more of a question for you guys, in my experience, I found that some of the best learning moments are when you're like really frustrated and it's not working, and it usually doesn't work, and you know, a lot of people might come into an electronics project and expect everything to go smoothly, but it rarely does. And I'm curious, like when it does get frustrating and it's not working, and you know it's a good thing, but maybe not whoever you're working with, like how do you support that? Because that comes up a lot, right?
As it does. I'm going to go dig up a link about some that goes to some writing I did on exactly that topic. But building up over time, like having a middle school class for a year, for example, never feels like enough time, but over the course of that year, kind of consistently encouraging students to take risks, to break things, and to be okay with having things not work the first time, and knowing there's a whole group of people going through the same thing who can help you find what to fix or find what to troubleshoot. Over time, for many students, that becomes more and more comfortable, but I do think it's a sustained kind of culture you build or community you build that helps with that. And there are still learners who just remain uncomfortable with that, but as the group gets better and better at handling that dynamic and helping one another, I think as kind of a lead facilitator, you get more time to help people who still struggle with that mindset.
I really agree with that idea of building up to it, and I think some kids coming into the classroom will have more of a background in it's okay to mess it up and it's okay to break it than others. And for equity, you kind of have to recognize that not everyone's coming from the same place there. But I think for me, it's been interesting to notice that some students, I feel, need a project that they can feel successful at the beginning. And so like Jie was saying earlier, something like starting simple materials, something that's going to give you this moment of satisfaction, that makes you anticipate a moment of satisfaction in the next project you do, and then you can slowly take on more and more complex projects because you know what it feels like when it finally works, and that sometimes that's not immediate.
I do have a method for that here. It's a combination of two things. First of all, from my mindset, you are there not only as a teacher, facilitator, but you are also like a host. So I do have some stand-up routines memorized for those cases. And if everything fails, go with humor and try to break the moment there so that everyone's all of a sudden laughing. And then you start unwrapping it. There is a extremely hard, this horrible game called, not horrible, it's horrible in the sense that it's really, really difficult. It's an amazing, awesome game called Dwarf Fortress, where you simulate a whole dwarven fortress, and it's really difficult. And the game motto is, losing is fun.
Yeah, don't get me started on that one.
Yeah, Chad knows. So basically, bringing that situation where frustration and having your electronics project not work is part of the fun. It's part of the puzzle. And memorize some jokes, get prepared for every single project that you're building. If you're building for some instruction that you had beforehand, you know which one are your stress points, the most most obvious points where the project will fail. So if you can create a funny situation or two for those points and memorize a little stand-up routine for when they happen, because they will happen, you will sound amazing to your learners, things will be light, and soon they will be with the whole idea that breaking things is fun.
And speaking of breaking things, we're about to break through past the hour we have for tonight's webcast. I just wanted to point everyone back to that Google document. It's shaping up really nicely. Audience members, if you have questions about particular technologies, what makes it good, where can you get it, what are some example projects, please do comment those in on the doc or on the etherpad itself, and both will stay live, and we'll try to answer those questions as best we can for you. I did suggest at the bottom maybe some things that might still be needed or things that could continue out of tonight's work would be creating a facilitation guide for this work or a handbook for some sample assemblies, codes, projects that might get people started in the Internet of Hugs. And so that's certainly a direction that this work could go in after this webcast, and I hope it does. We will capture the etherpad, we'll capture the Google Doc, we'll capture the chat, and we will put those things into a GitHub repo for this episode, which is just an open place where you can find the information and use it. And a link to that repo is at line 61 of tonight's etherpad. So that'll be more populated with more content very soon. Amira, do you want to take us through a round of final thoughts before we have to say goodbye tonight?
Yes, definitely. I think that was a really robust discussion. I just want to say a thank you to all of our speakers who joined us tonight for really bringing in your different perspectives on physical computing and IoT, and sharing how someone like myself who's less familiar with this this area can really jump in and maybe use small ideas within my educational settings and learn how to make it through breaking it, which I actually love to do. So I love hearing that practice in other places too. Let's do a final round, maybe 1 minute per person, just thoughts about what we talked about, areas you might want to explore, and sort of your personal next steps. Natalie, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, I think this has me thinking that we don't all talk enough, and I think there's probably educators who are really wanting to try something in this, but they don't have people to talk to. So it might be kind of cool to do some kind of mentorship or some kind of way that there's someone you can reach out to, and it's distributed a little bit so that it's not one person getting all the requests, but maybe we can volunteer and say, hey, at this time, I'm happy to answer some questions or whatever that is. Yeah, and it's been great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. The key word that seems to always come up in our curriculum calls is mentorship. So really valuing that importance of connecting people and that cross-sharing on a very global level. Jie, you want to continue with your final thoughts?
Yeah, it's been super interesting. I'm learning all the time, and from this conversation too. That's a really cool trick, Andre, about humor. Yeah, I agree. I think it's amazing that why don't we do this more often, right? And I agree. Mentorship, just more communication, or sharing. And knowing that there are a lot of people out there that's just excited as you are about all of this. I don't know. I'm excited. I wish there was more of this. I want to know how to scale this. Yeah. So thanks for having me here.
Lucky for you and all of our listeners, I don't think this is the last of our physical computing and IoT curriculum workshop calls. In fact, I think this is the beginning of a long series. Andre, would you like to take us home and tell us with your final thoughts?
I wish this could last for like another 5 hours because I'm learning so much. It has been awesome. Thanks a lot for having me here. And I really want for us to engage in the future with mentorship, with, I don't know, like discourse topics on our forum. And this whole idea of bringing people together is too awesome. I have no words. I want to have fun with you all.
Thanks, Andre. And your project after this call is to watch Kane's Arcade, because I think you will be inspired by it. And I didn't realize that there was actually a follow-up video to Kane's Arcade. So if you are like me and did not know that, it's in the etherpad if you'd like to watch it. I did throw it to you as the last one, but I actually forgot to Chad. I would love to hear your final thoughts as well, and really just to bring us home in the last minute.
Yeah, I'm just going to offer a final word of thanks for our guests. It was a fantastic conversation. I think this idea of an Internet of Hugs kit with some mentorship, networking, or community building around it could really go far. And I hope it'll continue. And as it continues, I know I'll be excited. And there will indeed be more Internet of Things episodes. So I am now automatically looking forward to all of them. Thank you, guests. Thank you, audience. Thank you for being so active on the etherpad and in the chat. One thing you can do there or on Twitter or anywhere else is tell us how to make this better or how to involve you more. And if you enjoyed tonight's webcast, we have a community call this month also about the Internet of Things. That's going to be on Wednesday, April 20th at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. GMT, 5 p.m., 8:30. Around the world it'll be at different times, but you can find it on our website. We'll have a Twitter chat later in the month as well on Thursday, April 28th. And our next workshop will be on Tuesday, May 10th, the same time. And we're going to look at the National Writing Project's Letters to the Next President campaign as an entry point for talking about youth civic engagement. And we hope to see you then. Take care, be safe, make some physical computing stuff.